What happens when a CEO goes undercover in his own restaurant and sees a chef screaming in a new hire's face? Brandon Keller stood behind the tinted windows of his SUV, watching the lunch rush swell through the glass storefront of Store 9, one of 13 family-owned bistros his late father built from the ground up. Brandon had inherited the chain 3 years ago, and while he'd managed to grow the business, he knew he'd grown distant from it too. His assistant had flagged a few troubling signs. Store 9 in Charleston had the highest turnover in the whole chain. Online reviews mentioned bad vibes and rude staff. The numbers were still solid, but something wasn't adding up. Brandon hadn't met most of the staff personally. With 13 locations spread across 3 states, it wasn't possible. Every location had its own manager and operated semi-independently under a district manager. And since each restaurant had its own rotating staff, nobody would think twice about a new line cook showing up. So today, Brandon wasn't showing up as CEO. He was Ben, a quiet guy who just moved to Charleston and needed a job. He'd shaved his beard, wore cheap steel toes, and swapped his usual blazer for faded jeans and a kitchen tee. The manager only got a call from the district lead saying a new temp hire was coming for a 2-day trial. As he stepped into the back of the restaurant, the heat from the kitchen hit him like a wall. "You the new guy?" a woman asked, pulling a tray of sliders from the oven. Her hair was tied back, her apron already stained with sauce. "Yeah, Ben," he said, offering a hand. She wiped hers on a towel and shook it. "Nina Carter, prep and grill, don't let the chef eat you alive." Brandon raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" She gave him a look. "You'll see." He didn't have to wait long. Before he could even tie his apron, the head chef, a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and a scowl to match, stormed in from the walk-in freezer. "Who the hell left the chicken uncovered?" The room froze. Nobody answered. Chef turned to a nervous-looking teenager slicing onions. You think this is a joke?" "No, sir. I didn't touch the chicken," the boy stammered. Chef marched across the kitchen and slammed his knife onto the counter. "If you lie to me again, you're out, you hear me?" The kid looked down, shoulders hunched. Brandon stayed quiet, watching. The chef he'd later learn the name was Doug stormed off, muttering curses under his breath. Nina leaned in and whispered, "That's Finn. He started 2 days ago. Chef's been on him since minute 1. "Why?" Brandon asked. Nina hesitated. "You'll figure it out." Over the next few hours, Brandon worked the line next to Nina, making sliders, chopping onions, and flipping patties. It was hot, loud, and chaotic, but not unmanageable. What was hard to stomach was the way Chef Doug treated his people. He barked orders at everyone but never lifted a finger himself. If an order came back wrong, he blamed the line cook, never the ticket system. If someone moved too slow, he'd call them dead weight. But he saved the worst for Finn. "Move faster, kid." "You cutting onions or writing a novel? Are you deaf?" Pathetic. At one point, Finn dropped a tray of clean spoons. Doug grabbed him by the collar and shoved him back. "Clean that up before I mop the floor with you." Brandon stepped forward. "Hey man, he just dropped something." "Chill." Doug turned, eyes narrowing. "You got something to say, rookie?" Brandon stared him down. "Just saying it's a kitchen, not a war zone." Doug shook his head and walked off. Nina leaned over. "You've got guts. Don't get yourself fired on day 1. By the end of the shift, Brandon's shirt was soaked with sweat. He hadn't worked a kitchen in years, but the muscle memory came back fast. What didn't sit right was the fear in Finn's eyes every time Doug came near. And the way the rest of the staff avoided speaking up. In the break room, Finn sat alone, picking at a granola bar. Brandon sat across from him. "Rough day," Brandon said. Finn nodded. "You all right?" Finn hesitated. "Yeah, I guess. I shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" "I wasn't supposed to get the job. Chef didn't want me, said I'd slow everyone down. Nina convinced the manager to give me a shot." He looked up. "I've got autism, not high support or anything, just I learn different." "He doesn't like that." Brandon's jaw tightened. "That guy treats you like trash," he said. "It's not you." Finn gave a weak shrug. I just want to work, that's it. Brandon stood up, forcing a smile. Then you will. Outside, Brandon walked to his car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He'd seen enough for one day. Tomorrow, he was coming back. And this time, he wasn't just watching. The next morning, Brandon arrived before the lights were fully on. The kitchen was still quiet, the air carrying the scent of industrial soap and yesterday's grease. He clocked in at the back, grabbed a fresh apron, and headed to the prep station where Nina was already at work, sleeves rolled to the elbow, slicing through a crate of tomatoes with steady precision. He nodded to her and got started on the onions. No small talk, no eye contact. Just another guy on the line. That's how he wanted it. Doug didn't show up until nearly 7:30, 15 minutes after the posted start time for kitchen leadership. No one commented. No one even looked up. He strolled in with a paper cup from a coffee chain they didn't serve, set it down on the counter, and made a beeline for the dry storage room. Brandon kept his head down and watched from the corner of his eye. Doug took his time, came out with a single box of gloves, tossed it on the prep counter, and walked over to a server who just entered, small, maybe 5 feet tall, with her dark hair tied tight and a notepad in hand. She couldn't have been older than 20. "You better not mess up my tickets again today," Doug said, not bothering to lower his voice. "I don't need another night fixing your garbage orders." The server stiffened. "I double-checked every slip yesterday." Doug leaned in. "You double-check nothing, you just scribble and smile." "That's not a job." Before she could respond, Brandon stepped closer to the prep sink and turned on the water, loud enough to cut the tension. Doug glanced his way, then back at the girl, and walked off. Brandon dried his hands slowly, thinking. By 9:30, the breakfast crowd had cleared and the kitchen settled into a lull. Brandon took the chance to clean out the bins under the prep table. As he kneeled, Nina passed by with a tray of lemon wedges. "Everything okay?" Brandon kept his voice low. "That server." "What's her name?" "Alyssa." "She always get treated like that." Nina paused. "She's new, 2 weeks in, she's quick smart. Doug doesn't like people who don't fold." "How's management not seen this?" "They don't show up. District lead calls once a week." "Manager Tom's always in the back office on reports or calls. He doesn't deal with the floor anymore." Brandon stood, wiping his hands. "Where is he now?" "Probably behind the bar, checking inventory." Brandon nodded and made a mental note. By mid-afternoon, they were short-staffed on the line. One of the fry cooks called out and the hostess left early with a migraine. Orders started stacking. Nina doubled up on stations. Doug didn't step in, he just shouted louder. "Table 23's chicken is still raw. You want him to sue us?" Brandon reached for the thermometer. "It's at 165. You checked the wrong plate." Doug grabbed the plate, threw it in the trash, and slammed a new one onto the counter. "Do it again, and do it right. I don't care if the thermometer says it's cooked, I say it's not." Behind him, Finn flinched as he stirred a pot. Brandon saw it. So did Nina. Minutes later, the manager, Tom, finally emerged from the office. Khakis, polo shirt, tablet in hand. He looked around the kitchen like it was the first time he'd seen it. "What's the holdup on 28? He asked, eyes never leaving the screen. "Talk to your chef," Nina muttered, not loud enough for Tom to hear. Doug turned to Tom. "We're down a body, no support. I'm doing what I can." Tom nodded vaguely and walked off without speaking to anyone else. Brandon followed him to the back, waited until he ducked into the office, then knocked once and stepped in. Tom looked up. "You're the new guy, what's up?" "Just wondering how long we're short on staff." Tom glanced at his screen. "We're staffed. 1 call out today, that's it." "Then why's Nina covering 2 stations?" Tom blinked. "Nina's good, she can handle it." "And Finn, what about him? He's being pushed harder than anyone here." "And Doug's," Tom held up a hand, cutting him off. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but Doug's been with us 6 years. He knows how to run a kitchen. You're here on a trial. Maybe focus on learning." Brandon stared at him for a moment, then gave a curt nod and left. That evening, they ran out of to-go lids, and the server team scrambled to improvise. Alyssa was trying to tape a foil cover over a soup container when Doug walked by and plucked it from her hands. God, you're useless. She stood there, blinking, her hands still held in the air. Brandon took 2 steps forward. Enough, Doug turned. What, you talk to her like that again and I walk, Doug laughed. You think I care if you walk, go ahead, we've got temps lined up. Brandon looked at Alyssa. Go take your break. I'll cover your tables. She hesitated, then nodded and stepped out. Doug leaned in, voice low. You're about 2 seconds from being out the door. Brandon didn't move. So are you. Doug's grin faded. Brandon turned and walked to the front where Nina was sliding a tray into the pass-through. Can you hold the line? She looked at him. You okay? Yeah, just need to handle something. He stepped out the front door and pulled out his phone. The call to corporate HR was brief, direct, and final. Doug was to be suspended immediately. Brandon also requested a private meeting with the district manager and HR rep that evening at the store. When he returned, he found Nina holding the grill solo, her forehead damp, but her hands steady. Brandon jumped back in without a word. At 6:15, the district manager arrived, a tall woman in her 40s named Marjorie. She asked for Doug. Brandon led her to the back office, where Tom was scrolling through spreadsheets. Brandon shut the door behind them. I'm Brandon Keller, he said, pulling his ID from his wallet and placing it on the desk. Owner. Tom's face drained of color. Marjorie froze. I've been working here for 2 days, Brandon continued. I've seen enough. He turned to Marjorie. Doug's behavior is unacceptable. He's verbally abusive, refuses to lead, and creates a hostile environment. He's done. Effective immediately, Marjorie nodded. Understood. Brandon looked at Tom. And you've been hiding in this office while your staff carries your weight. You haven't coached, haven't intervened, and you've allowed a toxic culture to thrive. What do you have to say? Tom swallowed. I wasn't aware it was that serious, you were told, more than once. Today I watched you ignore it again. Brandon took a breath. You're being replaced. We'll move an interim manager in by tomorrow. Tom's voice cracked. Are you firing me? I'm ending your role here. You'll receive severance and HR will go over the details, but you won't step foot on the restaurant floor again. He opened the door. Marjorie, stay with them. Make sure they collect everything and leave without incident. Brandon walked back to the kitchen. The air felt different already, calmer, focused. He stepped over to Finn, who was wiping down the counter. You're doing good work. You know that, right? Finn looked up, surprised. You've got a future here, and if you want it, we'll make sure you have the support you need. Finn gave a small nod. Brandon turned to Nina. You've been holding this place together. That changes now. She didn't react right away, just kept slicing, but her jaw relaxed, her shoulders eased. In the front, Alyssa returned from her break, glancing around like she expected something to go wrong. Brandon walked over and handed her a fresh notepad. Need a new one? She looked at him. Thanks, he smiled. We're going to fix this place. She nodded slowly, then walked back to her station. Brandon stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. He let out a slow exhale. There was still work to do. But at least now, the silence in his company was beginning to break. The next morning, Brandon didn't arrive in disguise. He walked through the front doors of Store 9 in a navy polo with the company logo stitched over the chest, one typically reserved for corporate visits. This time, no one was warned. He wanted the staff to see him for who he was and to understand that the past 2 days had not been a stunt, it had been a reckoning. Marjorie was already waiting near the host stand, clipboard in hand, her expression focused. She gave a quiet nod as he passed. Inside the kitchen, all motion stopped when Brandon entered. Nina was at the prep sink, her hands still wet. Finn had been restocking the lowboy cooler and now stood frozen, eyes wide. Alyssa peeked through from the dining room, her posture stiff. Brandon took a slow breath and stepped into the center of the kitchen. My name is Brandon Keller, he said clearly, turning to make eye contact with every person in the room. I'm the owner of this restaurant and the entire company. No one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the fridge compressor. For the last 2 days, I've been working here as a line cook, watching how this place runs without giving anyone a heads up. And I want to thank those of you who showed up, did your jobs, and treated people with respect. You carried more than your fair share without complaining. You made sure customers were served, even when you had every reason to walk out. That doesn't go unnoticed. He let that sink in before continuing. But I also saw things that have no place in this business. A toxic kitchen culture. A complete lack of accountability from leadership. And people being treated in ways I will never tolerate. Nina stepped away from the sink, wiping her hands on her apron, but said nothing. Brandon turned toward the door where Marjorie stood waiting. Doug and Tom are no longer employed with this company. That decision was made yesterday. Going forward, this restaurant will operate under new leadership. And those of you who have been overlooked, that change is starting now. He paused and looked toward Finn. You did your job under pressure no one should have to endure. I watched you show up on time, take direction, and keep going even when it was clear you weren't being given a fair chance. That stops today. Finn didn't speak. His hands stayed at his sides, but his eyes met Brandon's for the first time without flinching. Brandon turned back to the group. This place has good bones, I believe that. But we're going to rebuild the culture from the ground up. Training, support, fair scheduling. And leadership that actually leads. Nina finally spoke. What about today? We're still down 2 people and the weekend shift starts in 4 hours. I know, Brandon said. So I'm staying. And Marjorie is calling in 2 floaters from the Savannah store to cover the gap through Sunday. After that, we'll begin hiring for permanent replacements with your input. Marjorie gave a small nod of confirmation. The tension began to ease, not disappear, but shift. Brandon clapped his hands once. All right. Let's get to work. He grabbed an apron from the hook and joined Nina at prep. No fanfare, just rolled-up sleeves and a clean cutting board. By 11, the front of house was filling up faster than expected. Word about the owner's visit must have spread, maybe from a customer who'd recognized him, maybe from staff. Either way, the dining room was nearly full by 11:30. Alyssa caught up to him at the edge of the expo station. I'm trying to juggle 3 sections, she said, short of breath. But the new girl's not here. She was supposed to open with me. Did she call? No text, no call. Nothing. Brandon turned to Marjorie, who was now standing at the edge of the bar, helping organize to-go orders. Let's pull the schedule. Who was on? Marjorie tapped her tablet, then frowned. Katie, she's been here less than a week. First no-show? Yeah, all right, flag it for now. Alyssa, take 5 minutes. I'll clear your tables. She opened her mouth to object, then stopped herself. Thanks. Brandon grabbed a bus tub and moved through her section, stacking plates, wiping down surfaces, and refilling waters. Guests looked at him with puzzled curiosity. Some asked if he was the new manager. He just smiled and kept moving. At the bar, Nina stepped over with a tray of empty ramekins. You sure you want to be doing that? If I expect anyone else to do it, I better be willing to, he said. She set the tray down. You're not what I expected. Good, he said, because I didn't like what I saw either. By 2 o'clock, the lunch rush had passed and the team gathered for a quick staff check-in. They crowded near the back prep table, still in aprons and kitchen whites, steam clinging to their clothes. Brandon stood at the center. We've got a long weekend ahead, he began. But I want every person here to know that you have a voice now. If something isn't right, speak up. To me, to Marjorie, to whoever's leading this store, no more silence. A fry cook who hadn't spoken all day raised a hand. What happens when the next manager comes in? What if they're like Tom? Marjorie stepped forward. We're promoting internally. That manager will come from someone who's worked the floor here, someone you already know. Nina turned to her. Who? Brandon answered. We're offering you the role, Nina, interim general manager starting Monday. Full authority to make staffing decisions, handle schedules, and build the culture you've already been carrying on your back. Nina looked at him for a long second. You serious? I don't hand out titles to be nice, he said. You've earned it. She folded her arms. I'll need 2 more servers and a reliable line cook by next week. You'll get them, she nodded once, slow. All right then. Brandon turned to the rest. Anyone who wants to step up, now's the time. We're building something real here. And we're going to do it the right way. After the meeting, Brandon caught up with Finn while they restocked prep bins. The kid was quieter than usual but not withdrawn. You thinking about sticking around after your trial week? Brandon asked. Finn gave a tentative nod. If they'll have me, they will, but that's not the point. You want this. Yeah, Finn said. I like the work, just not the rest of it. You won't see the rest of it again, Brandon said. Not here. Finn didn't respond, but his pace steadied. Later that night, as the dinner crowd filtered in and the kitchen moved with smoother rhythm than Brandon had seen all week, he stepped into the office, Tom's former domain. The desk was clean now, the old spreadsheets cleared. A fresh clipboard hung with a new schedule, and Nina's name was penciled at the top. He sat for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of orders being called out, dishes clinking, and low chatter from the front of house. There was still more to do, more stores to visit, more corners to uncover. But something had shifted here, not just the staff, the culture. The silence had broken, and Brandon was done looking the other way. The following Monday morning, the kitchen was quiet but not tense. The kind of quiet that came with early prep work, focused, steady, and purposeful. Nina stood at the whiteboard near the back door, dry erase marker in hand, sketching out the week's rotation. She wasn't guessing. She'd stayed late Sunday reviewing each staff member's strengths, availability, and preferences. Nobody had asked her to, she just did it. Brandon stepped in through the side entrance wearing a plain work shirt, no logo. The point today wasn't to make an entrance. It was to observe how the store functioned now that the fear had been removed. Morning, Nina said without turning. He stepped beside her. You sleep? Few hours. Had to rewrite the dry storage inventory. Doug hadn't updated it in over a month. You going to delegate some of that? She clicked the cap onto the marker. Already did. Alyssa's taking over dry storage. She asked for more responsibility and she's good with detail. He nodded. What about Finn? Nina glanced toward the prep sink. Put him on prep full time. He's fast when nobody's breathing down his neck. He's been helping the new guy, 2 Carlos. Just started yesterday. Brandon moved toward the line to see for himself. Finn was showing Carlos how to portion marinade. His instructions were short, clear, and patient. Carlos asked a few questions and Finn responded without hesitation. There was no tension in his shoulders now, just focus. Alyssa entered from the dining room with a clipboard, headed straight for the storage closet. She didn't hesitate either. Brandon returned to the back where Marjorie was reviewing onboarding forms at the desk. New hires in progress, he asked. She handed him the top sheet. 2 servers starting Wednesday. Both have experience, both came recommended. Line cook interviews this afternoon. He flipped through the packet. You vet these, personally, no shortcuts. Let's keep it that way. By midday, the dining room was at half capacity. Orders moved cleanly from ticket to table. No shouting, no scrambling. Nina stayed close to the pass-through, but didn't micromanage. Brandon watched as she stepped in only when needed, adjusting timing or redirecting a misfired plate with calm instructions. At one point, a man in a charcoal suit entered and paced slowly near the bar, scanning the room like he was measuring it. Brandon recognized the posture, someone from corporate, possibly facilities or finance. You know him? Brandon asked, nodding toward the man. Marjorie checked the entrance log. That's Warren, facilities maintenance lead, said he was doing a routine check. Brandon approached. Warren, the man turned. Brandon, didn't expect to see you here. You're walking the floor without checking in. Didn't think I needed to, just maintenance. You're not here for maintenance. You're here because someone told you I've been on site. Warren hesitated, then nodded. Wanted to see what the fuss was about. Brandon narrowed his eyes. Did you check the storage ceiling leak? I saw the work order. It's minor. It's been flagged since April. Mold risk is not minor. Fix it by Friday. Warren gave a tight nod and left without argument. Brandon returned to the kitchen. Nina raised an eyebrow. Facilities? Trying to look busy. She tossed a towel into the laundry bin. Let me guess. Six-figure title, zero accountability. Not anymore. By late afternoon, the new line cook candidate arrived. Her name was Erica, mid-30s, sharp gaze, and a resume that showed 10 years of kitchen work. Nina handled the interview in the back corner while Brandon hovered near the register, pretending to help with systems training. I ran the grill at Maddox Tavern for 4 years, Erica said. Left when the owner's nephew got promoted over me. He'd never worked a line in his life. Why here? Nina asked. Friend of mine used to work under you at the old location, said you don't tolerate nonsense, you okay with fast pace, prefer it, keeps me sane. Nina nodded. Trial shift starts tomorrow. Bring your own knives. Erica cracked a smile, always do. As she left, Brandon leaned against the counter. You trust her. I don't hire people I don't trust, he paused. You ever think about what's next? Beyond store 9, Nina crossed her arms. Let's fix this one first. Fair. But I'm building something. Real leadership. No more titles as favors, no more looking the other way. She studied him. You finally seeing what your dad didn't? I'm trying. Later that evening, Brandon called a full staff meeting. No one was in uniform. Aprons were off, surfaces wiped, chairs pulled into a loose circle in the dining room. He stood at the front, not behind a podium but near the coat rack. No speech, just direct words. 2 weeks ago, this place ran on fear. Now it runs on effort. That didn't happen because of me. It happened because you refused to let this place collapse. A few heads nodded slowly. I came in undercover because I didn't trust the reports I was getting, not from managers, not from middle leadership. I needed to see it for myself. And what I saw wasn't just dysfunction, it was a team trying to survive a system that failed them. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each person once. Now we rebuild, together. That means fair pay, honest advancement, and zero tolerance for abuse. You see something wrong, you say something directly to me if you have to. No more silence. He stepped back. Questions? A server in her 20s raised a hand. What if this all fades in a month? What if someone new comes in and tears it down again? Brandon didn't blink. Then they answer to me and they're gone. No one else spoke. He gave a final nod. Get some rest. You've earned it. The staff dispersed, some quietly, some lingering in 2s and 3s. Finn stayed behind wiping down a table, even though it had already been cleaned. Brandon walked over. Something on your mind? Finn shrugged. Not really, just not used to being noticed. You get used to it, Brandon said. But don't let it change you. Finn hesitated. You staying here? Not always, but I'll be watching, closely. And if something's off, I'll know. Finn gave a small nod and stepped out. Brandon turned off the lights in the dining room one by one, then locked the front door behind him. Outside, the street was quiet. No traffic, just the low hum of a city winding down. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. This wasn't about a single store anymore. It was about every one of them. Because if it happened here, it was happening somewhere else too, and now he had no excuse not to see it.